So today's subject is beyond life and death. In most religious traditions, you find the idea that man is a special creation. Man, woman, that means human beings belong to a specially privileged category of creation. That's why you find in Abrahamic religions and also in popular Hinduism, sometimes it is stated that after creating the human being, God became quite happy. He was not happy till he created the human being. And the reason is that human beings alone can ask this question: what is the mystery of life and what is the mystery of death? Angels don't need to ask these questions. And the subhuman part of creation won't have the wisdom to ask the question. So only human beings can ask this question: what's the meaning of life and what's the meaning of death? Now, another important common factor in all major world religion is the idea that this life is an intermediary stage. We are coming from a state of perfection and we are moving towards a state of perfection. For example, take the Judeo-Christian tradition. Before Adam ate the apple, everything was fine. The problem started when he committed the original sin. And then we are moving towards a state where we will be freed from the shackles of this original sin, this state of imperfection. And this is found in Hinduism also. We are coming from immortality and we are moving towards immortality. So this intermediary stage is a passing phase, a kind of a state of imperfection. It is a very, very common factor. So two important ideas. One, the uniqueness of the human creation, the human part of creation. Second, the idea that this life is a state of imperfection, which we have to get over. We are moving towards a superior, a higher state of existence. These are two fundamental ideas. In most religious traditions, there is another very common belief system, and that is this: God has destined everything. A kind of predeterminism, as it is called in the philosophical tradition. That God has destined what we must do, that everything is in God's hands. We are part of a machine. This idea is stated in a different sense in the Gita. It says, Ishvara sarvabhudanam hrideshe arjuna tishtadi brahmayan sarvabhudani yantra rudhani maya. It is a statement in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, about 3220 BC. That's roughly the time when it was composed. The idea is this: God is operating this huge machine of cosmic life, including our own individual life. And God, as a divine reality, spirit, consciousness, resides within all of us and operates this machine of human existence. So all these are very, very common belief systems in major religious and spiritual traditions. But then there are people who do not believe, who are not affiliated to any established faith systems, people who do not believe in God, or who do not feel the need to believe in a transcendental moral authority or a creation, a monotheistic creator God. They don't feel the need to believe in such a being. Now what about them? Of course, I need not elaborate what modern scientists think, but it is a combination of what may be called accidentalism and naturalism. I'm using a term which could be misconstrued because the word naturalism has one connotation in European philosophical tradition, and it has a kind of pantheistic and pantheistic implication in the thought of Ralph Waldo Emerson, because his innumerable essays on naturalism, his important statements on naturalism, borders on some kind of pantheism and pantheism. But here, in ancient Indian philosophical tradition, naturalism was something different. In ancient Sanskrit, it was called, Swabhavavada. A description of this term may make the meaning much more clear. It was a belief, it was an interpretation of life and creation among the ancient Indian materialists, who are called the school of Charvaka system, a kind of materialism. They were not hedonists, they were not Epicureans, they just denied that there is a God. They didn't believe in anything that is beyond the sphere of our immediate perception. So they believed in a kind of system which is called in Sanskrit Swabhavavada, which modern scholars like Deussen have translated into the word naturalism, for the simple reason. Now, they believe that fire is hot because heat is its inherent nature. Water is cold because it is its inherent nature. So there is no need to go in search of a cause. A scientist, of course, may go in search of a cause, but it's only with the intention to answer the question of how, not why. Scientist is not bothered about the question why. He is only bothered about the question how. So also ancient naturalists. Remember, their earliest book dates back to 2200 BC, which is called Brihaspati Sutras, a text its full form is not even available today, even in manuscript form. Only portions of the text have been preserved, mostly from translation into Chinese language. Some scholars translated into Chinese around 9th century AD or before, during the period of Nalanda University, which was destroyed around 10th century AD, a huge university. From that book, we understand that there was a kind of naturalism in ancient India. And they said, life is not a very big deal, so to speak. The world is also not a very big deal. You don't have to worry about a cause. You live because what is happening is its nature. Nothing more to bother about. In contrast to this, there was another school of thought. I'm coming to the question of life. So I'm preparing a little background in the context of modern times and also in the context of ancient philosophical traditions. The earliest possible speculations on the mystery of human life, not by religious philosophers, but by people who said there is no religion, no need to believe in God. So that would be much more interesting in modern times, what they thought about life. There was another school of thought which was known as accidentalism, which more or less corresponds to the view of modern scientists who are also radical humanists. It's called accidentalism, and its ancient Sanskrit term was yadrichavada. Yadricha means just happens, accidentally. In naturalism, they believe there may be a cause, but that cause is built into the effect itself. You don't have to look for a cause beyond the effect. But the accidentalists believe there is no cause at all. It just happens. So there is no need to ask the question why. You only have to ask the question how. And that's the function of modern science. So, and they said, make the best of what is available. Have the best of everything. So they even denied the relevance of higher morality. They believed in dharma, but only in their own interpretation. Now, coming to the main subject, you find that human civilization, even the essence of human life, is built upon our ability to ask the question, why? If you are asking the question how, and if you don't go beyond the question how, even animals also, if you feed an animal with food every day, and next day you keep the food in a different place, by smell, the animal may be able to find out the place where the food is kept. But the animal kingdom cannot ask the question, why am I in this condition? And it is this question that ultimately takes us to ask the question about the mystery of life and death. Now, what is life? Again, coming to mainstream religious tradition, you find in Abrahamic tradition, for example, where there is an element of predeterminism, life is a straight line progression. You start somewhere and then you end somewhere. And you end with a kind of liberation, moksha, which is a kind of transcendental experience, which in Abrahamic tradition can be called entering the heaven. In Vedantic tradition, life is interpreted differently. Life is not a straight line progression. Life is a cycle. And this is not especially relevant in Hinduism or Vedanta, but is equally relevant in the systems of Buddhism, in all the four well-known schools of later Buddhism, and also in the Pali canonical literature. They interpret life as a cycle. That is, birth, life, death, and rebirth. There is an interconnecting link, a harmony that links these different processes, and that harmony is the cause and effect, or the doctrine of karma, that determines how we live and how we die and how we are reborn. So it is not just one chance. One important aspect about this is we can never resolve the mystery of our life and death through reason and logic. That is again insisted in Vedantic tradition. So Shankaracharya, great thinkers, like say, evamapi apradishthattvameva. Meaning is this: reason and logic cannot enter certain realms. Reason and logic, the whole epistemology, all the 6 tools of epistemology in Vedanta, like direct perception, inference, analogy, verbal testimony, presumption, and absence, or any other different schools of epistemology, they can never enter that realm of what is meant by the answer to the question why. They end with the question how. And the answer to how is within the realm of relativity. When you ask the question, why am I here? Why life is like this? What's the mean? what exactly is the meaning of death, which again related to why should I die? What's the meaning of death, all this? All these are related to the realm of trans logic, goes beyond the realm of reason and epistemology. To drive home this idea, I can just take one analogy from one of our famous Upanishads. It's called Katha Upanishad, which comes in the Yajurveda tradition. There is a mythological part which I won't explain in detail, and there is a philosophical, spiritual element. That's what I'm going to focus on. But the story can be given in a nutshell. In ancient times, there was a sage who was well known as a philanthropist, a generous person, who used to perform religious ceremonies involving distribution of gifts to all needy persons. And one day, he was performing this ceremony, distribution of gifts to people around him, poor people. He had a small son, a 5-year-old boy. His name was Nachiketa. See, this boy watched. In fact, he was the one who wanted to get an answer to the question, why? So he approached his father because he noticed something was going wrong with the way the father was performing the ceremony. In those days, cows, elephants, horses, and gold were the 4 currencies in ancient Vedic times, especially in the pre-Vedic period. Cows, horses, elephants, and gold. So this man was distributing cows. He had plenty of cows distributing among people. That was before urbanization started. That was a period when slowly agriculture was getting more popular. I mean, agrarian civilization was in its infancy. So this man was distributing not good cows, bad cows, cows that can't give much milk. Poor people around who had assembled in front of him. But instead of giving useful cows, he was distributing old, battered cows that can't give you milk, that will need plenty of fodder and grass, and occasionally give a few kicks also to those around him, but won't give any milk. So the child found out the man, his father, was playing a trick. So he went and asked him the question, to whom are you going to give me? Kasmai mam dasisiti. He said, actually, see, according to ancient tradition, a grown-up boy or son is the most precious wealth of the family. In old tribal traditions, children were the main asset. So you are supposed to give away all your expensive assets. So I am your son, you should give me to somebody. In fact, his purpose was to bring his father to a sense of propriety. Now he got angry and told him, I am going to give you to the Lord of Death. Murtave tvam didamiti. I am going to give you to the Lord of Death. That's how the story begins. And this boy started his journey to the Lord of Death. When he reached there, the Lord of Death was not there. He had gone somewhere. He returned only on the 3rd day. And on the 3rd day, when the Lord of Death returned home, he found a small boy was waiting for him, hungry and thirsty. And he was very much upset. So in compensation for this, he told the boy, look here, I'm sorry you are waiting for me, hungry and thirsty. You can ask 3 boons as a compensation. These 3 boons correspond to 3 levels of evolution and growth of human civilization. That's what we are going to focus on. The first boon that he asked was this, which is elementary. See, he had left his home without his father's permission. Father will be angry naturally. So he said, look here, when I go back to my home, my father should not scold me. Little child who was frightened of his father. And the father agreed, Lord of Death agreed. Not a very simple matter, nothing to bother about. He didn't ask for too much. All right. Shanta Sankalpa Sumana Yadhasya Vidamanyu Gautamo Ma Abhimurtyo Tat Prasishtam Ma Abhivade Prasida Edatrayanam Prathamam Varam Prane. This is the first boon I'm asking. My father should not get angry with me when I get back to my home. The second boon that he asked, that again corresponds to a higher level of human civilization. Now, what will we do if life is okay in this world? We have a good job, plenty of money, status, reputation, friends, everything. Nothing to worry about. Physically, mentally, we are healthy, family is happy, everything fine. Now, what do we do? As I said on a previous occasion, the highest suicide rate in the world is in Japan, where the state looks after everything from cradle to grave. The highest number of people suffering from schizophrenia, depression, especially among the aged people, are found in Japan, where Nachiketa's firstborn is perfectly fulfilled. Everything is fine. Trains run on time, plane, no strike, nothing. Except occasional natural calamities, which they can easily manage because they are so efficient, well-organized people. Now, here Nachiketa thinks, the boy thinks, well, what happens to me if everything is fine in this world? What happens to me after death? Now, the question of death, the mystery of death is the same as the mystery of life. Because death is nothing but the end of the physical body. And also, it resolves the mystery as to what happens after life. So, the ultimate question of life is the same as the question of death. Then he found out, well, after death, I won't have this body. I won't have this bank balance, friends, reputation, profession, job security, insurance, Medicare, nothing. So what happens to me after death? Am I going to be miserable? Every human being will have this problem at one stage or other. Except that person is a moron, is very brutal enough, is crooked or evil enough that he is not worried about what happens to him. That corresponds to a very primitive level of human evolution. But all civilized, cultured, educated people will be concerned about what happens to me, what happens to my bank balance, what happens to my friends and relatives, children after my death. Nachiketa, this little boy, thought over this question. And what every person will want, will have desire for. He also asked for the second boon. I should be able to enjoy the same way even after my death. That means the same bank balance, same profession, the same job, same comforts I should have after my death. And the Lord of Death was not bothered. He immediately granted this boon. So, Sattu Magdim Surgyam Adheshu Mrityu Prabruhidam Saddadhanaya Mahyam Sargaloka Amrudatam Bhajante Edatrayanam Prathamam Varam Prane. This is the Sanskrit verse which means this. You teach me that particular religious ceremony by performing which I will be able to go to heaven, where I will be able to live for a very long time enjoying the same physical comforts. Now, in Vedantic tradition, heaven is qualitatively a bit different from what it is understood in Abrahamic tradition. In Christian tradition, heaven corresponds to a trans-empirical existence, where you become one, where you live in the kingdom of God Himself. It is a spiritual elevation, but in Vedantic tradition, heaven is nothing but an extension of empirical pleasure, nothing more. Heaven is not a very high, not as again to use the classic American expression, heaven is not a big deal in Vedantic tradition. Heaven is nothing but a license to live as long as you want for a very long time in a state of perfect psychological and physical happiness in a 10-star hotel, so to speak, without paying rent. That's all. But that's again not a very satisfying situation, because if you enjoy the same caviar, the same expensive food, wear the same expensive clothes every day, every minute, then that itself becomes a terrible boredom. So Nachiketa asked for the third boon. That's the main topic of today's conversation. Now the third boon that he asks is this. Now look here, you must answer me this question. That is question why. According to some people, this physical body is not the only thing we should worry about. This body is perishable. And after this body disappears, what is left out? Is there something left out? Or that's the end of the journey? If human life, nothing but a journey that begins with the cradle and ends with being a piece of stone in the graveyard, nothing more. In that case, there is nothing to be happy about it. Or is there something beyond that? In fact, we become more refined, we become more civilized when we ask this question. We may not get the answer. That's the main point to remember. What's the difference between a saint, a Socrates, or a hardened criminal? The difference is, a hardened criminal cannot ask the question even, leave alone getting the answer. But a Socrates could ask this question. The ability to ask this question, what lies beyond the graveyard, is the beginning of human civilization. That's what makes human life worth living, meaningful and relevant. If we cannot ask this question, then either we will be machines or we will be morons. That's all. So, Nachiketas asked the question, Ayam prede vichikitsa manushe asti tige na ayam asti chaige edad vidya manisishtas toyakam varana mesha varastratiya. This is the Sanskrit verse. Roughly the translation could be like this. Well, what happens to a person after he dies? Some people say something remains left out. According to some other people, nothing remains. You should teach me this mystery. Now, when this question was put to the Lord of Death, it was a shock to the teacher, the great teacher, the teacher of this Upanishad, the Yama, the Lord of Death. Here, death doesn't have a cruel, unbearable connotation. Death here means a transition point. When you travel from here to New York, you have to lay over in some airport. It is not a cruel state of affairs. You may take rest for 2 hours and get another plane. That's all. So that's the status of death in Vedanta. So you have to remember, death is not a scary, wearisome, a cruel state of affairs. It is just a transition point. So in some airports, there are all facilities available, including yoga also. So this death is such a transition point. Nothing cruel, nothing scary about that state. So Nachiketa wanted to get an answer to this. But he was not willing to give an immediate answer. The teacher, Yama, wanted to know whether this boy is really fit for this higher spiritual knowledge. Because the ability to ask this question comes when you spiritually wake up. In the Mandukya Karika, there is a verse, Anadi Maya Supto Yatha Jiva Prabuddhide Ajam Anidramasuktam Advaidam Vidyade Tatha. This is Sanskrit meaning. The verse tells this. We are now in a state of deep spiritual sleep. Deep sleep, spiritually speaking. We are so much enamored, we are tyrannized under the tyranny of the senses and sense objects. So we never bother to ask this question. The question which human beings alone can ask. Why am I here? What's the meaning of life and death? So that's called Anadimaya. We are in a state of eternal long sleep, a kind of spiritual sleep. And unless we spiritually wake up and ask this question and explore the mystery beyond life and death, we are practically in a state of deep sleep. So the teacher wanted to make sure that this boy has really waken up. He has already waken up and opened his eyes, has understood the true implication of this question. And so he tried to test him. Look here, this is a very big question you are asking, which scholars, philosophers, and saints and sages try to explore into. By long efforts, they meditate for years and ages, and they study and contemplate, and then they ask this question. And you are a small child. It's not a question for you. Instead of that, I can give you many wonderful things, many playthings. That's what a child wants. And that's what human beings want, humanity wants. Because spiritually, we are all children, so long as we don't ask this question about the mystery beyond life and death. So the Lord of Death tried to tempt him. I shall give you the emperor of this world. I shall give you plenty of wealth, plenty of pleasures, comforts, everything. But please don't ask this question. Anything else you can ask for. But Nachiketa stood his ground. He said, well, I don't want anything else. So when the Lord of Death found out that the boy was determined to explore this mystery, then he explains to him the mystery of life and death. Then he said, so long as we interpret ourselves as this psychophysical mechanism, which can make the best of available comforts in this world, we can never cross the boundary of life and death. But when we really control our senses, tell ourselves enough to our tendency to enjoy worldly comforts, then we will be able to understand the mystery. And that path is the path of liberation. When we realize that we are in reality, an omnipresent, all-pervading, immanent, transcendental reality, the supreme consciousness, which is immortal, which is eternal, which is the nature of supreme consciousness, knowledge and bliss. So long as we do not realize this truth, our true nature, we will be moving along this cycle of the wheel of birth, life, rebirth, and so on. But when we understand this, then life itself becomes a pleasant journey. So there is a famous imagery, the imagery of traveling in a chariot. Atmanam radhinam vidhi, shariram radhamevacha, buddhintu saradhim vidhi, mana pragrahamevacha. Like that means, we are actually the owner of this chariot, the vehicle in which we are traveling. And our intellect, with our discerning mind, our discerning faculty, is the rider. And our mind is the reins which controls the horses which are driving the chariot of life. The horses are like the senses. Mind is the reins. Intellect is corresponds to wisdom. The rider who has a discerning mind. So, life, the journey, the path which we have to take is the world of senses. Suppose we interpret our life as a journey on a chariot. We should remember the senses are the horses. If the horses are not controlled properly, we may not reach our goal or destination. The horses may take us over a precipice and we may break our limbs and neck. That will be end of the journey. So the horses should be controlled. Horses are the senses. Who controls the horses? Mind. That's why the long strap, the reins are attached to the horses. And the reins should be held firmly in our hands. For that, we need a good intellect. So, mind corresponds to the reins. Mind should be controlled by a discerning faculty. Otherwise, mind can be our best friend, it can be our worst enemy. If the reins are broken, we won't be able to control the horses. So the senses will be out of control and they will take us in the opposite direction or may take us over a precipice. So this life is a journey. So before we undertake the journey, we must equip ourselves. So if you travel in bikes, motorbikes, you wear a helmet so that if you fall, you won't break your head. Like that, we must equip ourselves. How do we equip ourselves? So Vedanta says we must equip ourselves with discerning faculty, with proper discrimination. That's a discerning faculty. We should have a clear sense of understanding as to where we want to go. We should know the routes. So before we take up the journey, we must equip ourselves properly to undertake the journey. If we do that, then what happens? We can reach the goal. So, Vijnana Saradhir Yastu Mana Pragrahavan Naraha Sodhana Paramapnodi Tad Vishnu Paramapadam. Before we take up the journey, we must remember, we need to travel through this tricky road. So we must have some spiritual values guiding our journey, our path. So this positioning system should be properly adjusted so that we won't fall over a precipice. So that we should be careful to set a higher spiritual ideal before us. Our goal is to go beyond the world of sensory pleasures. That is, Saha Advana Paramapnoti, Tad Vishnu Paramapadam. We reach the highest spiritual goal of spiritual self-illumination if we take up this journey properly equipped with spiritual ideas. It's a very interesting description. Now, here a question may be asked. We have to live in this world. We face so many problems. So every day, every moment, we face conflicts and dilemmas and problems. So how can we interpret the world of senses as something that should be transcended? Why can't the world of senses itself be the supreme destination? Now, Vedanta interprets that this world is only a relative entity. It is not absolute. So, some of our scriptures compare life and world to an ocean. And different experiences that emerge in our life and in the world into waves and then forms, bubbles, high tides and low tides that emerge in the ocean. But ocean remains calm and quiet. So everything that happens in this world belongs to the relative plane. In fact, you don't have to believe in a God or in a philosophical system to understand the transitoriness, the momentariness, the perishable nature of everyday experiences in this world. Nothing remains permanent. Any elementary student who reads the first primary book on physics will understand this earth, this universe, all that we experience undergoes changes. So they are transitory, they are subject to changes. So they are not eternal. They don't remain the same for all times. Vedanta says that there is only one reality which could be called absolute reality, and that should remain the same without any change in the past, present, and future. And according to Vedanta, Atman is that reality. And we are in reality that Atman. When we interpret ourselves as this physical body, we are actually bringing our own sense of self to a lower level. In reality, there is a higher trans-physical, trans-psychological dimension to our personality. That is the spiritual personality. And that's why one of the well-known famous Sanskrit poems of Shankaracharya compares this universe notion. So it says, Srishtir nama brahma rube satchidananda vastuni abdho fenadiva sarva nama rupa prasarana. It's the 14th verse of a small work, Drik Drishya Viveka. We can buy from our bookstore. The seen and the seer, the subject and objects. The one who watches this phenomenon of universal life and the one who is part of this drama of universal life. So this verse says that creation is nothing but the emergence of bubbles, waves, high tides and low tides in the ocean. Now, these waves and bubbles do not constitute the essence of the ocean, but they emerge from the ocean, they exist in the ocean, and they get merged back into the ocean. But the natural state of the ocean is calm and quiet. But at the same time, these bubbles, waves and tides emerge, exist for some time, and go back. Similarly, this universe, the galaxy, may emerge from the ocean of existence, Brahman, the absolute reality, live for a few millions or billions of years or trillions of years and merge back. So they are as relative as an insect or an ant which may exist for a few minutes. The universe, the galaxies may exist for a few trillions of years. The insect perhaps may live for a few minutes or seconds. But they are also within the confines of the relative or relativity. Many of these ideas were studied very deeply by some of the pioneering scientists, especially atomic physicists, who lived in the 40s and 50s in Europe and America. Especially the idea that the world in which we live, the sense objects that we enjoy, everything that gives us pleasure, happiness and unhappiness are relative, belong to the relative plane. Once we realize the relativity of the relative, then we ask the question as to what is the nature of the absolute. But the first condition to be able to ask the question about the absolute is that we must be convinced of the relativity of the relative. In fact, that's the beginning of wisdom. That's the end of philosophy, and that's the beginning of spirituality. Where philosophy ends, logic and reason come to an end, come to a full stop. We ask the question, we turn the inquiry inward and ask the question, what lies beyond life and death? In reality, life and death are equally relative phenomena taking place in this ocean of existence. Death is nothing but a transition point. So in that case, that's not the end of anything. And life is also is not the beginning of anything. So we move in cycles till we realize that this cycle belongs to the relative. Once we realize that, we understand we are in nature beyond the cycle, beyond the wheel. We are actually Atman, the supreme reality itself. So it's a very difficult and obtuse topic. I have tried to touch some points in the subsequent lectures. We will continue the discussion. So thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.